Hello, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of International Mobility Week in Šiaulių University. It's a great pleasure to have you here in this room as well as connected to Researchers Excellence Network via internet. We have today a nice event. It's a public lecture which will be given by Professor Uroš Pinterič from Slovenia. And he will talk about hot issue in Europe nowadays about the future of European integration. And it's a great pleasure to have you, Professor, here. Thank you very much for accepting this opportunity. As well as presenter, we two moderators who will participate here. My name is Vita Yuknevičian. I represent Researchers Excellence Network. And my colleague representing the same RENET, as well as the Department of Public Administration, lecturer Jurgita Mykolaitytė. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. We hope that you will enjoy our presentation made by Professor, and as well, we are waiting for your questions. So be very active to use this opportunity to discuss hot issues with the Professor. As well, I would like to remind everybody who are connected to the public lecture via internet, you can make some insights or give additional questions in the chat line. So feel free to discuss with this issue with the Professor. Thank you very much for coming here, and Professor, the floor is yours.
First of all, good afternoon to everybody. Thank you for the invitation. The second thing that I should somehow probably expose is it's very nice to hear so many times being a professor, but the real thing is that I'm thankful to my friends, in fact, to be here, to get the invitation and to have the opportunity to speak in front of you as well as in front of the audience, which is obviously somewhere in the global perspective via the satellites around the world. Yeah. As it was mentioned, future of the European Union is kind of hot topic. Question is what really happened, when it happened, why it happened, and what's going to be next. In the time which is somehow assigned for my speech, let's say, I will try to address a couple of issues which were emerging recently in the field of understanding the future of the European Union, maybe a bit more from the critical perspective, maybe from the perspective of what is usually somehow overlooked. And I would say that since we are here with rather young audience, what is pretty much important for you as well. Because to be honest, not that everybody else, or maybe even me, that I'm kind of old, not really, but in fact, we are getting to the generation which is currently responsible for the state of the European Union. And the question is, first, what we will give to you in the perspective of, let's say, next generation. And in fact, there is also for you to think about how you want to have the European Union in the future. So from this perspective, I will try to address a couple of pretty much general things, maybe provoke a couple of different opinions, and afterwards I will be more than happy to discuss on this one. From the perspective of, let's say, decent social sciences, imagining that we have pretty much different, let's say, mind frames through which we can understand the European Union. So is there a right path? Is there a wrong path? Not really. It's just, you know, trying to find the proper compromise. The reason or the starting point of this presentation should be somehow what happened at the end of March 2017. White paper on the future of the European Union was released. Yeah? So European Union, or better European Commission, released the document how we should see, or what are the possible ways how to see the European Union in the perspective of next, what's this, 8 years approximately, so it goes up to 2025. This is spread through two different financial frames. One is ending in 2020, and obviously the next one will, if the things are going with the current steps, in 2027. But overall, this new, let's say, strategic paper is covering the period of two different financial perspectives, which might be important. The first thing, when you're reading this paper, which is rather short description on, let's say, a couple of dozens of pages, so like 30 something it is, the first thing that you're going to notice, there is no more European Union 28. It's returned back to 27. So first fact that we can establish from this white paper is Great Britain is out. That's the fact with which European Union is calculating, and it won't change. For instance, yesterday, Angela Merkel, Prime Minister, Chancellor of Germany, announced that Great Britain is still indebted to European Union financially. We are still having unclear situation what's going to be. The time frame for actual exit of Great Britain right now is set to up to 2 years, which brings us to 2019, 2020, when it's going to actually happen. In the meantime, European Union is already pointing out there is no more 28 right now, there is 27. It might happen 28 by including some other countries. Will this happen in this time perspective? I would be very optimistic if I say yes. There are countries which are trying to enter the European Union, obviously, as soon as possible. But from the perspective of the negotiation processes, this is pretty much unlikely that it's going to happen before the actual exit of Great Britain. The next thing which is important, or which you can read from this paper, is that when thinking about the future of the European Union, it's very clear that those who were preparing this white paper are strongly aware that European Union is divided by different elements or agencies which are strongly influencing what's going to happen. Yeah? From the national politics, from the economic disparities, from the social security issues, and so on. On the other hand, there is important element which is visible. European Union was the element of peace building in Europe. One thing which goes through the whole history of Europe is question of war and peace. And European Union in the recent centuries is the element of stability for 70 years without any kind of interstate conflict which would be escalating over manageable at the green table. Yeah? So I'm sorry. This is very important perspective. What European Union really is. It's the provider of the peace. Yeah. So from this perspective, when I'm going to do the detour towards different topics, and when I'm returning back, remember this one: European Union provides 70 peace. The next thing, which is in this white paper important, you can read it very much in detail. But if I need to put there just let's say a kind of presence or canvas for you, what is visible in the paper is that European Union in the world or in the global perspective became marginal player. If it was important, maybe in 1980s, in 1990s, especially after the economic crisis of 2008, European Union in the world perspective is completely unimportant in many aspects. It might have the 500 million of population, more or less. It might have pretty much vivid economy, sure. But what is the influence in the global perspective? Based on data which are provided by this very same white paper, the world population of European Union from the beginning of 20th century, let's say from 1900, yeah, so from beginning of 20th century to 2015, dropped from 25% of the world population to 6%. So this 500 million people, which sound enormous amount of people within the single country, so or single system, it's becoming less and less important. And on the other hand, which should be taken into the consideration, the countries which are taking over the total of world population are single countries. Here we are talking about the Union with certain cultural, political, and so on differences. Yeah? The next thing, European Union. I made a small recalculation of the data which you can access in the paper, so I was still including the Great Britain in this one. But from 2004 to 2015, the European Union perspective, with Great Britain included, is dropping, world GDP perspective of European Union is dropping from 31%, which is almost 1/3, to 1/4 of total world GDP. Next, in the same time period, China got their GDP from 5% of world total to 15% of world total. So economically, in this sense, one single country raised for 10%, while on the other hand, obviously, the system of the countries which are built on the economic perspective of what happened after the Second World War. Yeah, so remembering the history of development of European Union, what you have the atomic contract, yeah, so atomic energy contract. Then you have the steel and coal community, and then you have the bit later this economic community. Something which was obviously built in 1950s to boost the economy of the region, Europe as a region, in last 10 years or in the last 15 years, failed miserably. Yeah? So in this perspective, European Union sure is losing its importance. Should it be that much harsh? Probably not. On the other hand, Euro, from the introduction to today, obviously gained importance as a currency in the world perspective. It's second biggest currency after the United States dollar. But in the same time perspective, what happened? Chinese yuan, from not being in the map, got an 11% of world business done in this currency. So obviously, China is important economic factor, which is very often, I would say, very often overlooked in the political debate. Because, okay, this might be a bit personal perspective of everyone present, but we are always, how to say, questioning what's happening with Russia or what Russia will do. Nobody is really asking what China will do. But the point is that from the economic perspective, we need to look to this direction. China, India, Brazil. Sometimes, you know, the broader context of this so-called BRICS. Yeah? So it might be functional, even if the recent economic studies are somehow showing that also BRICS might be kind of past thing or less important, but still this is the probably future economic center to which we should look and which we should try to beat up. Yeah? So from this perspective, obviously European Union is losing its primary position right now as an economic union. Yeah? The next thing, since I already mentioned Russia, the next thing is prediction in this white paper. What's going to happen with the military expense? Yeah? Because we are kind of connecting from the perspective Russia, question of military, yes or no. I'm not going to judge right now this one, but from the military expenses perspective, the next decade, it's expected that United States will double its military expenses, staying the strongest military power in the financial perspective. The second one won't be Russia. The third one won't be Russia. Russia will be only the fourth one in this perspective, with, I think, the 10 times smaller budget than the United States. After United States, you have the military budgets of China, India. So this is approximately also in the military perspective, in the perspective of military power, who might be controlling the world. Sure, we shouldn't ignore that Russia is military strong power, but way weaker than we are imagining it. or as I would say, especially Western politics is trying to picture it out, which doesn't really, how to say, lose the comfort of neighboring countries. Yeah, we know that Ukraine is pretty much tense about what was happening in eastern part of Ukraine. I know that also Baltic countries are kind of questioning how to place the interstate relations with Russia. Also, Poland has its own worries. How much the things are escalating. This is something what probably the military experts should really answer. But from what I see, we are dealing in our societies with much bigger threats than the question of what will happen in relations with Russia. As I said, it's a question of personal perspective. Yeah? So, for instance, this might be hopefully not at least insulting, but it might be the opposite way from people from Ukraine, for instance. For them, this is different problem than for somebody who is coming from Central Europe, which has a bit more distance to the war zone. The next, let's say, you as a young population here, what happened? In 2004, you had approximately 20% of young people which could or which were eligible and so on. And so at that time it went even to almost 25%. Now it's dropping again, everybody's happy. But the issue is that in 2016, after the dropping, so after the reducing the unemployment among young people, we are back to 19%. The general unemployment around European Union as the average is around 8.9% or something like this. Obviously, again, with the economic crisis peak, but this didn't change. Sure, I can go with the economic perspective on this one, explaining that if you're keeping the inflation low and you need to have the steady growth of GDP, the unemployment is kind of sacrifice that you're creating in this sense, but this is probably for some other topic. What I'm trying to say, European Union is presenting something which is probably big failure as a good situation. We are getting down after the economic crisis, yes, but still, honestly, 1/5. So each 5th person in this class, which is under 25, will have a problem to find a job within 5 years after entering the labor market. And this is something that European Union is pretty much dismissing as, okay, we are trying to do something, but as I see from the data, the results are not really promising. In the way how we are solving it is obviously through migration. Yeah, young people today are much more willing to migrate and to figure out if they're able to get employment in the other country. Yeah, but still, overall, when you take the average of the European Union, the situation is not improving, because if, for instance, somebody, let's say, from the country which is economically less demanding, Eastern Europe, more or less, somebody is willing to work for much less, but this means that guys from the Western Europe will have higher unemployment rates among themselves. Yeah, so the average stays pretty much there. It's just the question who gets the job, but the level of job availability stays pretty much the same. The next thing is that European Union is trying to be extremely proud of rather well-balanced society with small differences among the people. So there is no extremely rich class and there is no extremely poor class. If we go through these statistics, measure with the Gini coefficient, which is around 20, it should go to 0 if there should be absolute equality. Yeah? But the issue that European Union is missing is not saying at which level of personal incomes this Gini coefficient happens. So, you know, we can be, in general, pretty much equally poor. Yeah? And this is something that I would say that many of our societies are doing very well, which means that also those guys who are doing rather well are not doing as good as they could. And on the other hand, those who are, let's say, in the economically undesired situation are pretty much just living with little bit less, which is just enough, to be considered to be poor. But on the other hand, those who are doing good are not doing much better. So this is the difference. But the level of poverty in the countries is again rather high, and in many cases increased. But this one, it's not just to blame on the European Union as such. This one, in many cases, can be blamed on the individual countries. At this point, I will point out I'm coming from Slovenia. My predominant work is in Slovakia, in fact, and obviously I had to migrate in order to assure me what I need approximately. And on the other hand, what I see from 2004 to 2015, when I was doing some kind of comparison on the poverty, Slovakia started with 36% of those who are in the reach of poverty, so who are socially excluded or poor. Slovenia at that time has approximately 12% of people which were socially excluded or poor. And then you have the economic crisis. In Slovakia, what happened? They managed to reduce till 2015 the poverty level from 36% to approximately 20%. In Slovenia, it increased from 13% to 19%. So from this perspective, obviously, I'm not able to blame just the European Union for certain things that are happening in the country. We need to understand this. National politics, in many cases, doesn't know to do what to do, how to do it, and but this might be a bit off the topic if I go into the details. The next things, which are now slowly moving for a while, just to comment on this white paper, but this is something which is not really presented this way inside. Sure, white paper is saying something about how we are facing different threats from outside. Especially this way we consider economic migration, which is mixed together with the refugee problem. And then we are discussing who is really refugee, who is economic migrant, who is then the radicalized fighter one way or another. I might return to this one later on, but we are facing these problems. What is the story behind? When you start to think in the historical perspective, what's really happened is after approximately 28 years, we start to rebuild walls in Europe. In what it was, 1989, but the main wall in Europe failed. Or if you want, the main wall of modern world failed. You have that ancient one with pretty much similar function. This was the Great China Wall. Then you have the Berlin Wall. And at the beginning of 90s, Berlin Wall failed. And now we have the European countries planning together, not really talking about the walls, this is going over the Atlantic Ocean, but what we are doing, we are putting the barbed wire around the Europe in order to protect ourselves. We are putting the panel fences, so different military barriers to control the migration. So from this perspective, after 28 years, we are rebuilding the walls, maybe with different symbolics, but we are pushing against some borders, maybe partially explaining what is the Europe, what we want to be the Europe in certain cases. So from this perspective, Slovenia putting the barbed wire, this is the military obstacle, which is pretty much sharp, so it has a razor blades on the wire, and it prevents people from going over it or strongly hurts them. So we are saying that the European border is Slovenian border with Croatia. Maybe because we are in Schengen, maybe because something else, but there is the border of Europe. On the other hand, the line continues with Hungarian perspective setting the very same border perspective on the border with what they're Romania. So we are saying what is north of this border, that's going to be kind of for Europe. What is further, even if they're European member states, well, I would feel somehow excluded. And then you have, obviously, in between you have this Balkans territory, Balkans Peninsula, which is including most of the former Yugoslavia, a couple of other countries, depends on the way how you define the Balkans. And then you have, obviously, the same story when the Macedonia was starting to put the border or the fence around its all towards the Greece. Greece is, on one hand, sure, one of the most important European member countries, even if from the perspective of problems, but it's the member country which sets the basics for the values that Europe is sharing today, especially on the democracy. But Macedonia is saying Greece is already part of something else, might be, or we don't trust this border to be protected any other way. So Europe is starting to set the borders again. To continue this funny, unpleasant story, Croatia, Slovenia puts the border to Croatia, then you have this small country, and Austria put the barbed wire and the panel fences also on the border with Slovenia. And if you would continue a bit towards south-north, the border between Austria and Germany, there is also re-established border control because of certain activities, which are coming from certain territory. Let's put it for now this way. And when obviously driving pretty much between Slovenia and Slovakia, Austria, listening to the radio, the border passage between Austria and Germany, 15 minutes, what happened? 45 minutes, 1 hour, no problem. When you have the prime time, for instance, when the people are moving for holidays or something, the border between Germany and Austria was, in last year, pretty much closed. Everybody was checked for the documents. So this is something. What's happening between Munich in Germany and Salzburg in Austria. So something completely within the core of Europe, to say so. So from this perspective, for sure, whatever the European Commission is stating in the white paper about the threats, the real activity which is happening is Europe is re-establishing the borders. Yesterday, it was some kind of a meeting regarding the future perspective of the internal security of European Union, and Austria wants to have the this Schengen borders checked, especially with the dangerous countries, so these which are, maybe leaking from the south for unlimited period of time, which is completely against, the basic idea of what Schengen should be. So Austria wants to have the right to prolong the check, or to prolong the border check for unlimited period of time, until such time when the situation will improve, when the security situation will improve. Why I'm explaining all these things around, pretty much because at a certain point, after saying something about different perspective of the future of Europe, I will probably address also what are the real questions which the European Union is facing. Now, getting slowly to the second point is based on what I mentioned. This is a couple of stories around, explaining a couple of things, and explaining what is really the, let's say, the frame which this white paper set for the future of Europe. Based on this, there is 5 different scenarios. Maybe some of you are familiar with them. Maybe this is something that it's completely new story for you. So European Union, or better European Commission, said that based on what we had, what I described in the first part, we are pretty much facing 5 different opportunities. First one is obviously carrying on. Nothing big changes. The European Union excludes the Great Britain and we are trying to continue the way we are doing. So slowly improving different policies in more singular way of thinking, from single defense policy, single foreign policy, and so on. This is something that Europe was dreaming already from a long time ago, and it's continuing. Yeah, this is something which will go further on, but in this carrying on scenario, it's done very slowly, not really talking about any kind of federation, but obviously ties among the countries should be slowly strengthened. The second option is pretty much, how to say, the opposite one, or pretty much singling out the most important part of the European Union, returning the situation back to 1951. This is called single market. So in this single market approach, European Union kind of puts aside all meddling into different policy spheres and decides to keep everything that European single market is going to be functional, that it's going to work. Everything else goes back to the nation, to the nations, to the member states, and European Union is not meddling. This shows what is the most important from the perspective when things are failing. Single market is the stuff that everybody in the European Union somehow agrees that this is what we were established for. Yeah? So we are returning back into the times when the European Union, or whatever it was called before, European Community, European communities, and so on, that we are returning back to the basics. That's the second option. The third option is so-called Europe of circles. Different member countries can strengthen different policies among themselves and not burdening the other ones who are not interested. For instance, going from Slovakia, agriculture policy, extremely important. Seafood production, I think maritime policy, not really important because they don't have access to the sea. So from this perspective, it's not important to them. Slovakia decides we go into the circle which is dealing with the agriculture. We are not going to the maritime question. Slovenia, because of different also geostrategical perspectives, with its 47 kilometers off the coast, we go for the maritime. Agriculture, not really, because our agriculture is not that much important. Yeah, and obviously those who go with the agriculture will have to deal with Poland, for instance, with France, with Germany. Those who are dealing with the maritime issues, Italy, Spain. Okay, Great Britain is out. Yeah, and they need to deal obviously how to shape the relations with Norway, which is outside on one hand, and it's strongly influencing the European maritime policy, and Iceland. Yeah, so this is different perspectives. Then you have what's this fourth option. What European Union can do is that they decide they do meddle into the smaller set of policies, not just single market, not certain circles what somebody wants, but European Union as a whole decides that sure, economic policy is important, agriculture policy is important, security policy might be important, foreign affairs policy might be important, but they are kind of sick of common educational policy, for instance, or trying to establish some kind of a common social framework or something like this. They decide this is not important, we stop playing with this, but we keep the core elements which are of interest of whole Europe, and they do much more in this field. They strengthen the ties in these particular fields, and everything else is kind of set aside. The fifth and final scenario is option for doing to do within the European frame much more in more fields. So doing much more together. So trying really to establish federation. That's the final option. I believe that you understand what what would be behind the idea of federation. You can pretty much see it in the case of the United States of America. That's the model which we are trying to go after one way or another. It means that we need to get proper European government, which will be a bit less, how to say, fair in the way than current European Commission is. You know, European Commission, at least one commissioner from each country, different fields, try to rotate the people a bit and so on. But when you have the real government, well, you took the people that you're able to work with. The presidential, the president of European Commission, it really becomes kind of prime minister who has different competencies. Yeah, this changes. European Parliament should get, in this case, different role. The importance of individual member countries will be forgotten, and we can pretty much face the question: what happens? What happens in the general situation afterwards? How we are able to deal States of America and European Union. We are not really the middle. Europe as such is keeping the national identities. So the question is if we are able to tolerate that there will be no representative in European Parliament from Lithuania, for instance, from Slovenia, from Slovakia, from lots of small countries which right now have a couple of members of the Parliament, and they feel like represented. They have a feeling that they can say something and that they can fight for the national interest within the Europe. But when you have the federation, this political perspective might change. I'm not saying that this is what's going to happen. I'm saying that there is a possibility, yeah? Especially because we should be aware of, let's say, this real foreign policy perspective, or a realistic foreign policy perspective, where still the size of the country, availability of different sources plays a role. Yeah, so this is the issue which we might face. So what is with these 5 scenarios? For those of you who are a bit more interested into the European Union, or for those of you who just by fact of being a couple of years older, we saw the same logic 50 years ago. European Union was setting very same options. Europe a la carte, Europe of circles, yeah, strengthening the ties, which was called the difference between widening, which was including new member states, versus deepening of the European Union, which is strengthening the ties among the countries which are already in the Union. So from this perspective, the options which European Union is offering as perspective, at least to 2025, and possibly for also continuation, there is nothing new in 15 years. The world situation changes. We went through, huge security changes in the, let's say, world perspective. We went through huge economic changes or shifts in the world perspective. And in all this, the answer of the European Commission is exactly the same like 15 years ago, when we were questioning if we should spread the European Union first in 1995 with what it was, Finland, Sweden, and Austria, and then in 2004 with this big group of Central Europe plus some other countries. So the answers which are provided are exactly the same. So from this perspective, the question is if European Union really did anything in this sense. What really happened in Europe in this perspective or in this time frame is that predominantly the face of violence changed, because everybody right now is probably kind of asking what's with the security issues. The face of violence changed. If 20 years ago the main threat into the European countries was internal separatist violence, for instance in Ireland, in Spain, also in Italy, a bit earlier in the time, yeah. there were lots of, let's say, internal terrorist acts trying to prove the political right, trying to prove some kind of autonomy right of different. We finally have something which is called external enemy. Question is if it's real external enemy. But our focus is getting shifted in this way from internal security issues to external security issues. The second thing, which really changed in these 15 years from the European perspective, European Union became responsible for much more, or for many more different things that are happening in Lithuania, in Slovenia, in Croatia, whatever country which is member of the European Union. So if in 1995, European Union was participating in decision-making within member states at that time, to a certain degree. Today, this is 60–70% more strong or stronger in this perspective, which means that European Union, if something, should become only more accountable to the member states with common European policies, in the sense that it needs to provide frame which serves all the countries. Yeah, these are two biggest changes which really happen, and just from the perspective, what kind of responsibility European Union has in the sense of its basic principles regarding the protection of democracy, cultural diversity, and so on and so on. The very sad funny story is happening right now, for instance, over a couple of years in Hungary, but maybe what is going on nowadays, it shows how far European Union forgot its basic role in this. Sure, this is the case of Hungary. I hope that nobody is going to be too much judging me on this one, but anyway, Juncker was calling Orban a couple of times publicly dictator, yeah? And it was considered very interesting political element in the sense of political communication and understanding how to navigate different people in the international relations. But in Hungary, Orban was acting against the humanity. In the case of 2015, when the big migration wave came through Hungary, there is lots of, let's say, video evidences, lots of cases, lots of talking, how the people were treated. Against all the perspective of protecting basic human rights, like, for instance, personal dignity, to start with very basic. Yeah? Nothing really happens. Orban sets the fence on its border. Nothing really happened. He got some border. So this was pretty much the story. Orban was, in the pretty much same period, changing the media legislation, making sure that freedom of speech was tolerated but not provided. Yeah? So if there is a chance that somebody would be a bit too much critical in the wrong sense, do you remember this story? I remember it from some other times. Yeah? It's something which goes really with the strict dictatorship regimes. What Europe did? Pretty much nothing. Orban changed the legislation in the sense, the national legislation in the sense of providing the political rights at the local level. What Europe did? Nothing. Despite lots of small political groups were excluded from the possibility to compete for the political positions, which is the basic principle of democracy. And then, when in these days Orban accepts the law which should ban by certain rules, one of the universities, major international university from the Hungary, which is established by American capital, Within 2 months, Orban finds himself in front of the European Court from yesterday on. He has, I think, 1 month or 2 in order to change the situation, or he will be in front of the European Court. Sure, it's probably right from the perspective, but the story which is behind is how it's possible that when it comes to human life, when it comes to basic political freedoms, Europe froze. When it comes to some, in fact, pretty much economic interests of Western capital, European Union acts pretty much fast. So this is the question: what is really European Union about, and what kind of things they need to solve? And from this perspective, in the sense that I slowly conclude, obviously, I would like just to mention a couple of things that I believe that European Union should address, regardless of which form it's going to take in the future, but assuming that it's going to be still the union of at least 27 countries. So what should we really put attention to? What should we really care about in this perspective? First, European Union should finally make awareness among the member states that multiculturalism is not just nice scientific word for having different people in your country, but it needs certain level of acceptance from both sides. Yeah? So France, not really good. But on the other hand, for sure, certain religious traditions in the Europe, which are coming not from the European territory, could be loosened up a bit as well. Yeah. So this is issue which comes from both sides, but for sure Europe has its own fair share of failure accepting differences among the people. The second part is think or rethinking the economic perspectives of the population of 500 million people, which are obviously living in this territory, in the situation of post-job society. So if you're kind of interested into the social perspective of development, you know, you have this pre-modern society, modern society, kind of industrial society, then we go through information society, and we skip knowledge society because this one never really happened to us, just on the paper, into the post-job society. This is the time when approximately over 50% of people won't have job. Yeah? What we're going to do in this situation? Who's going to be earning money? In which way? How are we going to assure our basic living conditions? This is something that classical capitalist perspective has no answer so far. It might figure out something. Obviously, I might sound very dramatic right now in this sense, but I'm not saying that there should be some kind of big revolution of economic idea or economic perspective, but we should start to think about this. And European Union is taking the responsibility right now for 500,000 people because it prevents the nation states in many cases to provide their own citizens in the manner they could if European Union wouldn't be mentoring the economic policies also of the state, if it wouldn't be mentoring in some other policies, preventing people to, in many cases, to execute their own economic initiative. For instance, European Union order in Slovakia killing thousands of cows, which might provide, you know, milk for certain population, which might develop this industry, because somebody bigger has different interests. The European Union said Slovakia cannot have so many cows in this perspective. They need to get rid of them. State is trying to figure out how to create the state company to protect these animals and to do something with this business. European Union says this is interfering with free economy, and ordering killing of thousands of animals which can provide some living conditions for people is not. Yep. The European Union needs to find the answers to this kind of things. And the last point that I might make at this perspective, obviously it's clear that the world situation changed significantly over the last decade and a half, 2 decades. And European Union, in the first place, right now, should answer the question how to keep what European Union is proud of. And this is returning me to this point because at the beginning kind of mentioning how to keep the peace. Probably not only in Europe, among the European countries, even if this might be difficult at a certain point, but also in the world perspective, because as it looks like now, we are counting of sanity of 2 people, which might cause that all the world will be for the 3rd time in history brought together into the violent manner. Just because 2 guys have access to wrong tools and not enough mental capacities to do the things in the green room, to negotiate the conditions how to work. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but this risk is pretty much big, and I would say that the role of the European Union in this perspective is the crucial one. So whatever is happening around here, also around Lithuania, I know that certain organizations are strengthening the forces in this part of the world for whatever intelligence reasons they have. They might have it, but from the perspective of what we know from the recent history, the country which is so willingly participating in supporting the military presence in the region, a couple of times fabricated information about chemical weapons in certain countries, like, Iraq 2003. There is a huge danger of chemical attack, and I don't know what. The war is over. The guys pretty much lost in the financial sense, in the sense of human lives. They changed the regime that they established in 60s and 70s, and then they figure out, oh, yeah, there was not really anything going on. So from this perspective, the most important part of the Europe or European Union at this point is to be actor of the peace in the region as well as the world perspective. So from this perspective, I was obviously trying to address a couple of things that are connected with this basic future of the European Union regarding the white paper, regarding the scenarios till 2025. And obviously I was trying to put this into some broader context, not really providing the answers, I would say, but maybe trying to raise some questions also among you to think about, especially if you're political scientists, maybe to figure out some answers or to participate in the critical questioning of the reality. So thank you very much once again for invitations. Now I'm pretty open for the questions.
Thank you, Professor, for your insights. And now we are waiting for questions. Please just raise your hands, and I see.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm from Ukraine. My name is Yuri, and you mentioned Ukraine several times. And I have my own opinion. Of course, it's not expert opinion because my scientific field is finance. But anyway, I think that a few things about that you said, for example, that war is far from Europe, and also you compare it military power in the world, but from the financial aspects. And that is United States, India, China, India, and Russian Federation is first. So I don't see there any European country, and I think there are a lot of people in Brussels, which don't understand all threatness or danger actually from the east, and they don't understand that Ukraine is a country which actually the country who saving the fundamental principle of European Union, the peace, because of Ukraine actually, because we are stopping the aggression from the east. And it's a little bit strange that even United States provide more help to Ukraine than European Union, actually. And I think that not so many countries of European Union understand this. Of course, Poland, Lithuania, and other Baltic countries understand this very well. And also the last thing that you said about some forces which now situated in Lithuania, and I think it's more positive than negative for Lithuania, for example. And I have maybe one question to you because you're an expert in that field. And what about perspectives for Ukraine? Imagine from the point, maybe from the point of Ukraine, I want to hear your opinion, but from the point of Ukraine, do we need to make such efforts to join the European Union in the future? And thank you.
Thank you. No, this is pretty much nice question, important question, which was partially answered already before I started. I expected that obviously there are different perspectives on the reality, and sure, from the perspective of country which was ripped apart between two nations in one way or another, there is also the question for the military experts and such. So, you know, I'm not myself military expert, so maybe my perspective is just one of the options, but it might be valid points. Pretty much I'm going to say it this way. I'm going to first answer your question and then probably circulate around, but should Ukraine do the effort to join the European Union? Yes. Not to join the European Union, but in order to further develop what you're doing in your country. You don't need transparency, accountability, fight against corruption, fight against political elitism for joining the European Union. If you're a protector of democratic or positive political values of Western countries, you should do this efforts from this perspective, not because you want to join the European Union. I mean, this might be for you motivation, but the reality is that if you consider yourself progressing towards the modern Western society, you need to do it, regardless of what's going to happen with the European Union. I mean, European Union accepted in its middle countries in very poor condition. It accepted countries in very good condition. For instance, Ireland, when it was accepted to European Union, was not really, you know, what we consider proper European country at that. The second thing, when Ireland joined the European Union, the conditions to join the European Union were much more nice, to say so, to that country. That, for instance, they were for Slovenia, Slovakia, Lithuania, Estonia, whoever in this group of 2004. And this group of 2004 joined under better conditions than Romania, Bulgaria, or later on in 2013, Croatia. So, you know, European Union is pretty much playing with each next circle of enlargement more tough guy. For instance, Turkey is trying to enter European Union for decades, until I think it was last week, when the referendum happened and when Erdogan pretty much openly said, sorry guys, the things got too stupid for us, we are going our own way. Is this good for Europe or not? Even if they decided not to go to the European Union, as long as they would be, enhance the European values, that's okay. That should be okay for everybody. Yes, and you made the call in between. They are not. They changed the path backwards towards something where they were at the beginning of 20th century and before. So from this perspective, your question should be always answered positively but European Union can be just your motivation. Regarding who is financing the what you expressed yourself as protection of the European values or modern values against the Eastern countries, who is financing this? Sure, this is one of the pictures. My perspective is a bit more cynical on this one, because, you know, what I see around the whole region, United States of America, they have certain interest, which goes back to the Cold War, to isolate Soviet Union, which you were part at certain time in history, or nowadays Russia, from their vital interest, especially in the southern parts of the oil, and obviously from possibility that certain countries like Ukraine, Baltic countries again, even Poland would fail again under the some kind, this is wrong word, so don't understand it directly, again towards the Soviet times. Yeah? So this is something which might be cultural fight there behind. And from this perspective, which is out of your questions or comments, is that if you go a bit more south, to the southeastern Europe, to the Balkans, there is a different feeling than, for instance, in the Baltic. Baltic countries are, from what I know, they have different culture, different tradition. They're not really Slavic countries. But when it comes to Czech Republic, Slovakia, also Poland, obviously, but there is different feeling, yeah. And countries of former Yugoslavia, we are Slavic countries. This is the idea which was alive in 19th century, to merge these countries under the role of Big Mother Russia, one way or another. This connection was present. And obviously, it can be just cultural influence, and it can be territorial influence. In the case of what's happening between, so in the case of Ukraine with regions of Luhansk and Crimea area and so on. So this is the territorial aspect. But what you're getting in the financial perspective from United States, and partially, as you said, in much smaller part from Europe, is pretty much supporting your idea that you are not part of this, you know, big Slavic family in the historical sense, but you should obviously reconsider yourself as Europeans, which obviously I know that there is, especially in Western Ukraine, this feeling is much strong, yeah, much more strong. But on the other hand, I see that it creates lots of problems. Because what happened when it was 2014, yeah, this Maidan revolution. So first, it was your internal fight, as far as I remember, and as far as I follow, between old political elite and new political elite, if you want, or between the pro-Russians and pro-Europeans. But this was your internal fight. I don't know who was participating in it, because we know that different intelligence agencies have the history of sparkling up the rebellion within the country in order to destabilize it for one purpose or another. And from this perspective, that was your internal problem. And then the big forces took the advantage of you in this perspective and might cause the reasons that you are afraid of today, that many Europeans are afraid of today, just because the big kings, to say so, were playing the game of chess. And you are the battlefield, or you are the exact, you know, square in which everybody wants to play its own king. It's not just about the military presence, it's not about how the borders are going, it's about the cultural perspective. And this is something that you, as a Ukrainian nation, you should think about how to transform yourself really in this European way, and at the same time, being very careful what is developing out of this story nowadays. As far as I know, you have strong race of right-wing populism. You have certain groupations which might be too much keen on certain ideas, which might put you into the further destabilization of the country. So one of the basic European values that you will have to defend within your own territory is also keeping this political modesty in order that you don't get into the situation that you will be fighting two fronts, which happened in obviously in the time of the Second World War, when many countries were fighting at the same time their political differences and the external enemies. That's going to kill you on long term. Slovenia was one of such cases. In Slovenia, in 1941, 1945, we were fighting three different fights. Communist revolution against the, let's say, reactionary forces, whatever it was considered this way. We were fighting Slovenian Nazis against the Slovenian partisans, which were not necessarily communist, but for sure they were kind of closer to these ideas. Yeah? And the third one was coming from the countries abroad which were occupying our country. It happened, what, 70 years ago or even. Today, we are still fighting, at least in the words, in the hatred among the people, the very same fight. So be careful about this one, because in this case, you can fail as a Ukrainian nation and you can fail as a European nation. So you need to get over this somehow and try to figure out some way. Who's going to help you on this one? Because this is the part of your argument that European Union is not participating in this thing. I think that European Union not really, because it's very clear from Maastricht Treaty onwards, when the common European foreign policy was trying to be kind of established, that European Union is not able to lead the single policy, single foreign policy, which would set itself on one side, on the other side, or say how we're gonna act. We have so many different cases from 1991. Sorry, Maastricht was 1992. That you have different sets of countries which were acting in different manner. For instance, I mentioned this American attack to Iraq, very unsubstantiated. Okay, one, so unjustified one, and the Europe didn't act as a whole. There were countries which were strongly pro, especially those ones which had the terrorist attacks which were connected to the September 11th, yeah, and they felt threatened. So they were supporting United States and whatever they did. And there were the other countries saying we are not doing it. And then you have something which was called Vilnius Declaration, which happened in your country, so Lithuania, and there was a set of countries which said we're gonna support United States in the their idea how to create the world peace. This was connected to, I think, the Iraq or Afghanistan issue. But in this perspective, what happened in the case of Slovenia? Slovenian government never allowed Slovenian foreign minister to sign this declaration, and he did. So, you know, this far the cleavage in understanding who's going to support or who's going to take certain perspective in the foreign policy goes. Even within the single countries, two parts of the same government were not synchronized what is the position of the country on the issue. So in this perspective, sure, Europe should probably support you in certain perspective. In exchange, Europe has a right to expect that Ukraine is going to behave in the proper manner. This is the part that you need to work on, I would say. And the European Union, in this perspective, should first declare or figure out which of those 5 scenarios it will be working. And if it won't be some kind of federal approach, you cannot expect that the European Union as such will be able to take single position in regard of Ukraine, Turkey, or whatever case that we might get involved one way or another. So, sorry if I'm a bit bitter, or if I made you a bit bitter, but this is, you know, again, just one of the approaches to see things. So, I'm not sure how much I answered, but
yeah, thank you very much for your answer. And just one sentence or 2 sentences. We just want you Europeans to remember history lessons from 1930s, and that history is cyclic. and that phrase that who refuses to feed their own army or army of allies will feed army of enemies. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we have another question.
you. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's Georgi Davidian. I'm from the country that you unintentionally maybe did not mention, Georgia. It's called the connected to these issues, and my question is that, so on 28th of March, we got this regime, but from my perspective, very good, but from my perspective, so you mentioned that European Union accepted many countries. Till today, there are countries, I will not mention them, that are still in worse condition than Georgia today, economically, corruption. But still, Georgia is not managing to become the member of the European Union, and I don't know exact reasons. So maybe it's the geolocation, it's far, maybe it's fear of Russia, maybe because, as you mentioned, that for European Union, economical issues are more important than other values, because they are somehow connected. So, and my question is that, what do you think, whether Georgia will ever become the member of the European Union, what we are developing much better than some European countries who are now in the European Union. And you mentioned that Russia is on the first place, somehow by military, I don't know. Fourth, yeah. So, but despite this, we have Abkhazia occupied, we have South Ossetia in 2008 occupied, and 20% of Georgia occupied, and it's somehow frozen conflict. Everyone forgot about it because of Georgia. And despite this, Russia continues to. I think that Europe today is losing on every aspect. Russia. You mentioned Turkey also, and you said that what should we do? I mean, but I think that European Union itself is to partially blame for it, because Turkey is aspirating for European Union for already decades. But what is the reason they are not accepting such an important player? Religion. They don't want a Muslim Islamic country to be member, because they made now Turkey to turn from secular Atatürk Turkey to the Erdogan Turkey, which will be based on Islamic rules. And my third question, so you said that it's obvious that European Union, after the creation, we avoided war in Europe. We have no war in Europe for 70 years, but does it trigger more wars outside of Europe? This is my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the questions. First, I'm not the president of the European Commission, not even close there around. So, question who will join and when to the European Union, it's something that I'm not able to answer on this level. Yeah, I'm going to do it the other way. This is the thing which is old, like 20 years almost. That there were ideas that what is the Europe in the first place, yeah, and what should be within the European Union perspective. And from one of the scenarios, there is 40 countries. Now there is currently 28 members. It's going to be 27, but there is 40 countries, approximately 40 countries, which can be considered European, including Georgia. So from this perspective, sure, you can have the idea to get in. You have certain rights. Why European Union is not dealing with you, maybe in the way that you want, you mentioned your answer pretty much significantly. I would say that any country with even frozen conflict with Russia has, at that moment, very limited, if zero possibility to join in. Very simple, because this would then become direct conflict between Russia and European Union. And there are two things. Question is, if European Union is able to handle anything when it comes to military issues, yeah, in this context. So I would say that obviously European Union is avoiding certain regions for different reasons. You mentioned Turkey because of Islam. I would say so. There was North Africa, the North African country, which was applying 3 times. I think it was Morocco or something like this. Sorry? They were applying, they applied and they were like rejected 3 or 4 times. So in certain cases, European Union doesn't really have the interest into taking certain territories, and especially not interest when these territories are in the condition which might conflict, influence the direct conflict. Also, the question of Slovenia and Croatia was pretty much interesting because, you know, Slovenia became the member country in 2004, Croatia became in 2015. Even nowadays, we don't have solved the border conflict. And it's big issues between the countries and for the European Union. And there is no military conflict going on. But still, it's the issue that Europe needs to deal with in different cases. And if you can imagine that Europe with, in fact, 28 different foreign policies is able to take one single position, what to do with Georgian conflict with Russia, that's going to be a tough one, which might result, you know, that, yes, in this case, Russia might act pretty much openly and figure out that Georgia is, in fact, part of Russia. I mean, I'm not bullshitting myself in the sense that Russia doesn't have the capacities. Russia has enough capacities, I would say, that any of, let's say, these small countries like Baltic states, before NATO is able to deploy anything significant, Russia has this under control. And then NATO will be, you know, trying to push them out. And I would say that European Union doesn't want to go into this one, because then it's going to happen when, what your colleague mentioned, in the sense what we should remember from 1930s. Yeah. So this is part of the answer. Sorry, I was skipping you.
Since we have talking about those conflicts, frozen conflicts, we call this separate zone. So Croatia and Slovenia, they have a problem over the territorial some issues as well, and over the border. But how you will explain then Macedonia, at least, why they are not the members of European Union, even though in economical situation we're better than Romania, Bulgaria, and Croatia, but they have this problem with Greece, and they still not in the European Union. And another comment about how Russian is interested in Georgia, but you know, like, I don't know, in 2016, the South Ossetia, they said that they want to become the part of Russian, and Russian said, no, we don't want to now. Yes, you have your own president, you have your own territory, and we are not claiming to have you back, you know, like the part of Russian. So basically, this is the question. So maybe the Russian politics is more to make countries in European Union more fragmented and to have issues between each other without making any like straight impact or any right actions, like get fight each country. So basically now I really want to comment about what's happening in France. We have students from France as well. About the presidential elections, and so far as I see, Le Pen has a really chance to win. So if she will win, so there won't be any best friendship with German, because we were now talking that European Union will be governed by German and France. And if I'm good with Macron, I am bad in pronouncing, will win. He said that European Union will be governed by France and German. And so far, Le Pen is thinking that we will rekind our policy with Russia. So how it will be working in European Union, continuing of those some kind of territorial conflict, and how the power relationships will be changed after what will happen in European Union. This is one of scenarios if Le Pen will win. What will happen? No Europe anymore? No European Union anymore?
The science at least the social sciences should refrain from predicting. So at this point, nobody knows what will happen. Yeah? But for sure, we can include the scenarios which are going from complete disintegration of Europe. I'm going to kind of return to this one. I still didn't complete the answer to the colleague there. The last thing is that how it's possible that the country which is in better condition than many other, which are already member states of the Europe, so how it's possible that you are still not within the European Union. First, I'm going to say what I already mentioned, or what was my response to the, let's say, diplomatic issues. And the second thing, which is the question which I'm not really familiar with, what is the size of your economy? Because many of those countries which are doing worse than Georgia, they are pretty much big countries which might be used, you know, as a cheap labor force, one way or another. So European Union is taking certain advantage over this situation. The next thing which is connected to this is pretty much, as I said, is each next circle of enlargement. At the day of the enlargement itself, it's going to be more problematic. So if the Euro or European Union was keeping you out for so long, the demands will be higher and higher. Why? Because they can. In many cases, just because they can. Because the European Union still is a club of the countries. It's international organization. You can be invited, you can become a member, or they can deny you. Bless you. And from this perspective, this is part of the problem that all the countries which are trying to enter the European Union have. They never know what kind of, in many cases, stupid conditions they will set for you just to play with you, one way or another. I mean, it's it's not clear situation. This is okay. I'm pretty much sometime in academic world, and it's like how to get your titles. Yeah, how to get sure. If you want to become the PhD, yeah, you need to do certain things. But then depends on your supervisor how he will play with you, what you need to do, how you need to do, how many times you need to rewrite your PhD in the process. Not because you really should. In some cases, because the supervisor can. And this is pretty much the same situation. European Union can, and they are playing this for their own interest, from the perspective that they don't have really any interest in you. Maybe just saying you are too far east geographically. In no other perspective. You might be a great country, but you are too far east, and that's the reason. But they are not willing to tell you this to the face, just like they were playing with Turkey long enough, as colleague mentioned, or it was you, I don't remember right now, but that Turkey, secular Atatürk's Turkey, become again redevelopment of something that we know from the history as the Ottoman Empire. And not just in the mental state, but also in other perspectives. So this is part of the story. Returning back to the next question, in fact, what's going on in the Europe itself? Why should be the problem if Le Pen wins? Because on the German side, you have this new front, which is also very strongly against European Union. They might cooperate among themselves very well and agree that European Union shouldn't exist anymore. I'm hopefully doing this here as a pun, as a joke, but many things are possible. And so far, there is a trust in French people, French citizens, that when it comes to the serious decision, they take the better option. But we trust in many guys, yeah, but also the perspective is, if the decision of Great Britain is so bad from the British perspective, why we should, British perspective might be completely different. We are part of the European Union losing the Great Britain. But their perspective, it's, okay, we are going out. And what's going to be the further development, nobody really knows. For sure, 50% of people plus something small were let's go out, and another 49 plus something small were let's stay in. Yeah, so it was close call. But what's going to happen at the end, nobody really knows. Also, the question, if Le Pen wins, what happens in France? Will France really go out of the European Union? It can happen, but it's not necessary. It might just shift the power position from what the other candidate was mentioning. Macron? Macron, okay. I'm bad with French, sorry, yeah. What he's saying in what you were mentioning, and if you read it in some perspective, he's saying we're going to bow to the Germany and their rule, and we're going to pretend that we are part of, you know, co-ruling coalition of the Europe. But Le Pen might say, okay, guys, so you have two options. You're gonna stop behaving like German supremacy, and we're gonna make this Europe like a joint project with United Kingdom out, with France and Germany together as equal partners. Sorry? What? I mean, Italy is founding member. It's historically important country, but I would say that Italian perspective in this story doesn't play a really serious role. It's the second circle. So if you go by power of decision making in Europe, you have pretty much this, let's say, bound between Germany and France, which is like really strong connection one way or another. Then you have the set of countries which are important, I would say, like Italy, Poland, Spain, maybe somebody else in this perspective. Who else would be there? But Portugal, maybe to a certain degree. If you go with Portugal, then obviously also Ireland, it's the same. And then you have really like these peripheral countries which are not playing any kind of significant role, like for instance, Slovenia, Slovakia, Czech Republic, also not really Baltic countries. They need to be heard, they are listening to them, but decision is shaped according to bigger ones. There is probably one exception to a certain degree. This is countries of Benelux, despite of their geographical smallness, they are core of the European Union, and in this perspective, they might have bigger say than their actual size, geographical size. Yeah, but from this perspective, maybe I'm not saying that this is good for culture perspective of Europe, but from the political perspective, Europe might become balanced if Le Pen wins, or Europe will fall apart. This is the scenario which pretty much we are always pushing aside. You know, there will always be European Union. There will always be no. Before we're going to accept Macedonia, before we're going to accept Georgia, before we're going to accept Serbia or Montenegro or something like this, this is completely different issue. Yeah, then. But before something like this happens, there is also possibility that European Union won't exist. Pretty much, it might be again some loose combination of states having the basic agreement, which will be outside of this scenario, which I mentioned, like single market scenario. Sure, this one might stay, but it won't be European Union. Because when we are starting to put different policies aside, there is less and less of European Union. It's just a bunch of the states agreeing on basic principles with much more sovereignty to each one of them how to rule its own territory. They might still be friends, they might still work together, but the illusion of European Union falls apart, especially in the perspective of something that I didn't really mention, but it's extremely important. European common identity. So as long as we are, for instance, Lithuania, Slovenia, Slovaks, France, Germans, we don't have really the proper basics for European Union as such. Yeah? Because, for instance, what we are always kind of comparing with the United States of America. We have what? Americans. Sure, they might be Hispanic, they might be black, they might be I don't know what, but they are Americans. If you check the surveys regarding our feelings towards the European Union, the most population, we are still Lithuanians in Europe, we are Slovenians in Europe, we are not Europeans. And from this perspective, the project was maybe politically a bit too optimistic, and we need to get this realization. And as long as we are defending our historical fights, in fact, I'm going to use your history. Yeah? Lithuanian. As long as you have a beef, even nowadays, with Polish guys over the things which happened long time ago, it's very hard to believe that there is something that would be extremely European. Because this is the part of history which you are still carrying on, which you are still proud of, which you are afraid of, which you are angry with in different perspectives. And so long, you are not between Lithuanians and Polish guys. You are not Europeans. You are Lithuanians, you are Polish. Yeah? And from this perspective, when you get over this, when you become European, then we might think about these federal scenarios and really have strong European Union. The same goes with Slovenians, Croats. The same goes with French people, with Germans. Yeah? This is, I would say, maybe the crucial point in the perspective. And as long as we are keeping our national pride, I'm not saying that this is wrong, but I'm just saying so far we have the problem to be 100% that European Union is the only way and it's the only right way. Even if we manage to keep another 7, hopefully, another 7, another 100 years of peace in the continent, but we might find a different form which will still be better.
We want to give the feedback.
About the reason you told us about that pros and cons, the problem that you can become a member because of pros and cons. But now I would like to say about under one framework of NATO and European Union. And as far as I know, that when in 1955 West Germany was accepted by NATO, that was a huge problem. But they wanted to accept it, and they accepted on condition that they would not trigger the 5th article of NATO, which is the core article, that attack on one member is attack on all other members. So what I want to say that the pros and cons is not the reason, and you said it very right from my perspective that Europe plays as they want in order not to accept you or delay acceptance as well as they did in Turkey. And they seem to me like, from this perspective, as a religiously racist or something like that, because they don't accept only religion. And by doing this, they trigger Turkey to look now to the east, make alliances with the so-called maybe enemy, say, from the north. And they also may have problems, as Turkey was the wall protecting huge immigrations, as Turkey accepted most of the immigrants, they have 3 million from. Thank you very much for your answer.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. I'm Chung Min from South Korea, and I studied a master degree of regional development and governance. And I've heard that the effect of a labor union in Slovenia, Slovakia, more powerful than my country. How does the labor union influence on the public policy making process, and in your country and even European Union?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, this one is, from my perspective, rather technical one. So, for instance, what happened in the change of legislative processes, if I understood you right, yeah. So you want to know how the policy process changed in the countries because of entering the Europe.
yeah, labor union, how to join the policy making decision.
Okay, so how the labor unions are influencing policies in these countries? Okay, the presence of labor unions in the countries like, especially I can talk about Slovenia in this case, they are shaping the policy processes with through the tripartite negotiations. So, you know, you have the government, economics perspective, or capital if you want, and you have the workers. So they are the labor unions. So the general idea is to have these tripartite negotiations where they agree on basic conditions of the society. So what should be approximately the minimal salary acceptable for everyone, and similar things, which is kind of constant process, which is intensified each couple of years. The second thing, labor unions, they are influencing the decision making, for instance, through the protests, issuing or making the issue of certain rules of the government. If this goes for some taxation issue, the protests will be bigger. When this is something, you know, affecting just certain working population, the protests might be smaller. There might be some lobbying behind, which we don't really understand how it happens, but obviously, yes, it's present. The result of influence of labor unions in the policy making, at least in Slovenia, depends on the case and depends on how many people they are able to make angry. So, you know, if they are able to make mass dissatisfaction with what the government is trying to impose based on the economic interests, then they might change it. But in many cases, labor unions in Slovenia, they are just, you know, pointing out that there is something wrong from the perspective of the working people. Yeah. Regarding, since you were asking about also other countries, yeah. Honestly, I have limited information how it goes, for instance, for Hungary, yeah. But in Slovakia, compared to Slovenia, the labor unions are much weaker. So their influence is much lower. On the other hand, in Austria, labor unions are stronger than in Slovenia. So the legislation which goes through the government will be respecting the position of the workers better. Yeah. So really depends on the country, but I cannot say that countries that you mentioned, so Slovenia, Slovakia, Hungary, that they have the common idea of the labor unions and their role in the policy process. Yeah? Slovenia kept rather strong influence of labor unions, while on the other hand, Slovakia, for instance, through the reforms in the 1990s, pretty much lost the labor unions as an important element in the negotiation process of this tripartite, let's say, social peace negotiations. Yeah. Okay. You?
We have first, I would like to thank for you for today's presentation. My question is, does European Union have foreign policy? Please, can you explain?
Thank you very much. Sorry? European Union has foreign policy, common foreign policy, according to the strategic documents, yes. So in Maastricht Treaty and Amsterdam Treaty and Treaty of Nice, a common European policy exists on paper. When it comes to the action, the reality is that countries are behaving very much, as I explained before, according to the historical positions, which means that I think that you mentioned the tie between France and Russia. This is the historical friendship tie, which was not really interrupted even through the Napoleonic Wars. Yeah, so there was a conflict time, obviously, in between. But Russians and French, they are historic friends. So France is maybe a bit softer on when it comes to how to treat Russia in the sense of sanctioning, for instance, for what they are doing in the territories of Ukraine. When it comes to such next case, again, Serbia and Russia, they're strong friends. Even if they're separated by parts of European Union, but this friendship still exists. And it's stronger than, for instance, what the European Union decides. Also, if you check when Russia is, how to say, re-asking also European countries, we shouldn't forget this one, also European countries, from the economic perspective, they are re-asking to liberate the sanctions against Russia, because, you know, these sanctions, they are not just against Russia, they are influencing the European economy as well. So, yeah, we're going to impose sanctions on you. This is like shooting yourself in the knee. Yeah, so sure, you did something, but you're harmed as well. And from this perspective, obviously the countries which were closer to Russia through the history are a bit more pro, let's reduce the sanctions. It doesn't make any sense. While certain other countries which have a bigger beef with Russia or bigger dispute, to say properly, they are obviously standing in the position this is something we shouldn't do. Yeah? So from this perspective, on the paper, yes. In the practice, not really. Yeah. And if there is something in the practice, the states will usually group around the bigger countries within the Europe. Yeah. So they will say what the Germany says, what the France says. Yeah. So we decide which of those or previous, I mean, in previous conditions or still existing conditions, but this is losing up, what United Kingdom says. So there is an important country which we decide to follow, but for sure those important countries are not agreeing on common foreign policy at all times. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't.
Will be there any more questions from the audience? No? Then maybe we will ask for our moderator, Jurgita, maybe to say a few summarizing sentences about this discussion and maybe add some more insights.
Well, first of all, I would like to thank you, Uroš, for
Welcome.
dedication of your time and for interesting in being European Union. Well, one of my teaching subjects is European policy and European management. And of course, we're always having different arguments. And so far, it looks like we are both on the same side. But actually, there are some issues which we are not on the same side. But what we totally...
So European.
Yes, so European with Slovenian and Lithuanian identity. But what actually I'm totally agree on, and colleague from Ukraine is as well, that European Union is actually peacekeeper. And I think in order to avoid more theoretical wars or more European level wars or the Third World War, we have to understand that all countries have to work on something. The issue about what you mentioned, identity, national identity, and you were like a little bit saying maybe we have to lose a little bit national identity, but so far we see in Europe that the trend is that we are not losing. All the parties in European Union countries are winning the main seat at the parliament, those who are in favor of nationalism. The case of Lithuania, the case of Great Britain, and the case of France showing that the tendency is going very well. So, for my case, when I'm talking about identity, I have two identities. But I don't feel somebody saying that I'm from Europe. I'm from Lithuania, and then you know people from United States, sometimes they're looking like, hey, Lithuania, and then I'm going with Baltic states. And the last moment when somebody's still wondering, okay, Baltic states somewhere, maybe you are still in the Russian Soviet Union, then I am from Europe, Lithuania is independent. So I think losing up a little bit of nationalism ideas, now it will help a lot. And when we're talking about who invests more in protecting, Europe, United States or European Union as a country, this is the problem with the foreign policy, because actually national countries, they have their strong foreign policy. Like Lithuania, we're saying now, okay, in 1990s, we said that we are against everything what Russia is doing. That we want European Union, we want NATO, we got it. And still, in our all national foreign strategies with the big capital letters is written that the biggest threat is Russia. Even sometimes there is no threat. You don't feel so much threatened, but this is the number, you know, everything is against. But maybe sometimes forgetting this, I don't know, history a little bit will help. Because when you were talking about those economical protections and what the European Union did with Russia, of course, Lithuanian economic, we have like, how is it in English?
Decline.
Thank you. Yes,
It's
decreased our national budget because of the foreign relationships and the foreign international economy. So I really like think that now it's not such a good idea to open European Union for new memberships because they have to deal with what they have. I think in 5 years, maybe we already finally we will know if we choose United States federalism. This is should be working, maybe working because it will be more integrated. But if we won't be culturally integrated, we can't talk about this. And the last comment of Turkey, why we not accepted Turkey? We were playing around with Turkey, and then we said finally no, because we were waiting something Turkey to do. But I think we were afraid of religion, maybe, but maybe afraid of as well values, different regime. We expected Turkey to do something, but from economical point of view, Turkey would be the greatest choice in order to enhance European economical level. But they will be paying quite a big amount to the European budget. So the questions about European perspectives is about how national countries will work. And now since the foreign policy has to be integrated a little bit or synchronized with NATO policy, maybe we will find out the ways how to work. But this is the question. Maybe. We will see. And about future, I don't know. I can't say, as Uroš mentioned, we are social scientists. We are not recognizing, but sometimes maybe we should do this. But I hope that we will have a keep the safety of European Union, because if somebody strongly will ask, do I want European Union? Yes. From personal position, yes, because it has done a great job with a higher educational system, because all we are from here, it has a job from my personal point of view, meeting different values, integrating different cultures, and so on. But at the national level of countries, I think we got lost because we don't know what is European Union for us did actually. Good job or bad job. So when the countries will answer this question, they will understand what they are actually doing in the European Union, especially those kind of small countries. Because we have, if we want to have any influence at European Union level, we have to have friends. And so far, we don't know. Okay, it looks like Great Britain was our good friend, but now going out. Denmark, yes, they are like supporting Lithuania, but do Denmark actually have a voice there? Do they want to have a voice? This is the question. So now we are looking for other friends, and we will see. So, yeah, France, German, what else? Any suggestions? Maybe Slovenia? Do you have a voice? No.
Come on, I'm your friend. I'm your friend.
Yeah, but do you have a voice in Europe? That's the question.
The story is different, you know. When you're searching for the friends, I mean, this is pretty much any kind of story. What's going on among the? No, it's not about the small countries. It's about us as individuals. There is something. There is always the state politics, which goes one way or another, and which plays with ordinary people a lot, regardless of what is the situation. But coming from the region that I am, my friends were killed in the Balkan War. And this is not just, you know, the question if independence of Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, whatever, was worthy of it. People were dying on the both sides. And from this perspective, sure, this is the language barrier because the things are in Serbo-Croatian. But when you talk to people, there is always šta će ljudi. So what we should do, we are people. So from this perspective, we can be Slovenians, Lithuanians, and so on. Our countries, at certain point, will require from us, maybe, hopefully not, that we shoot at each other. But on the personal level, it's always about people. There is, sure, always the certain share of people which are a bit overreacting to something. But for the majority of the population, there was never question in former Yugoslavia, are you Serbian? Are you Muslim? Are you, I don't know, you're my neighbor, I'm going to help you. Yeah? If I can, I'm going to help you. And this is pretty much also something that we need to understand in Europe. We need to understand in Europe in relation to Ukraine, in relation to Russia, in relation to Syria, Turkey. Politics will play their own games. But on the personal level, we shouldn't forget, and in this perspective, I might believe that regardless we have European Union or not, we're going to stay friends and we're going to make sure, you know, that nothing too bad will happen. Fortunately, I'm wrong, because the state politics will always find a way to get over our bodies. That's the bad case.
So I would like to thank the Professor Uroš for this nice, I would say, and very hot issues discussion. The lecture became a discussion, and I'm very thankful for very active participants for giving such insights or thoughts about European Union future, as well as the relation with neighbors. I think that for today, the question leaves still open. But we are the young generation, so maybe we will be available to solve our problems, to understand to which aim the European Union is going, and I wish peace for the world and the Europe, as in the contest of beauty. So thank you very much, Professor. Thank you, my colleagues, and for all participants here in the room and online to be the part of the Researchers Excellence Network. Even you are always welcome to be the part of this network as the members. And we hope to see you in the next RENET events. So thank you very much.